Back here on the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the certified Angus beef brand. Brian Schaaf here in the inner sanctum of the world, headquarters of premium beef, certified Angus beef. Joining me alongside at our hydraulic electric table, Chef Tony Biggs, meat scientist Diana Clark. How you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm so happy. I'm so happy, right? Because we are going to talk about this. So years and years and years ago, right, I had a neighbor who's kind of a meathead, right, in Ashland, Ohio, which is where I live, right? And he said, okay, question for you. Why is there no such thing as bacon from cows, right? This would have been like 2010, right? Of course, now we know like there's bacon from cows.
Definitely bacon from cows.
Anatomically, cattle and swine, very, very close, right? We've talked, the same muscles really exist, although on pigs, generally they're much more tiny and adorable, right? Yes, but so they're very, very similar. Bacon anatomically comes from a very specific region on the beef carcass that we want to pay homage to because it's not just there for bacon.
Yes.
There's a lot more going on there. We're talking about the short plate. Right? It's kind of the often ignored part of the carcass, I guess, when people are, looking at the ones they've always heard of. It's the Charlie Watts of the beef carcass, right? It's always there. It's always Charlie Watts,
Never
right?
miss a beat.
Rolling
Never
Stones drummer.
I love
Yeah.
him. He's a catalyst.
He's amazing,
Seriously.
right?
He was. Yeah.
Right? So now that said, you may be like, what? Trust me, when we tear into this and you find out what comes from the short plate, you're going to be like, oh, I get it. Diana?
Yes.
Tell us about the short plate.
So the short plate itself is that's that beef belly, that beef navel. You think about the entire plate primal. I mean that houses your plate short ribs. Okay, those are fantastic. So you think about barbecue, you think about Korean style short ribs. That's typically where those would come from. You also have your skirt steaks. Your inside and outside skirt also come from the plate, which a lot of people forget. And even when I was thinking about, what are we going to talk about with this plate? Like, oh yeah, the skirt steaks. I mean, those are phenomenal. And so there's also, you have your lifter meat, which that's another kind of understudy. I mean, a lot of people don't really think about lifter meat, but especially now, it's really something to turn to, as you can utilize it for fajitas if you marinate it, pound it out a little bit. Definitely a great application there, and we have some of our value-added products that already utilize that cut. But it is just, I mean, it's a fantastic piece. And you can get fattier ground beef too, because a lot of times it's sold as our 50/50s trim, meaning 50 fat, 50 lean. And so people would take it, process it with another lean source to get more of your 80/20, 70/30 type blend. So that's, I mean, honestly, that's used a lot today in ground beef for sure. And who doesn't want, essentially you're getting beef belly in your ground beef.
Yeah.
Right?
It's amazing, right? So basically you are getting braisable items, plate short ribs, which are amazing barbecue items, right? Those big long bone short ribs. You've got your skirt steak, inside and outside, which outside skirt in some regions of the country is probably more expensive than tenderloin because it's in such high demand.
Oh, without a doubt.
But also, and correct me if I'm wrong, the hanger's in there too, isn't it? Because that's kind of an extension of the skirt, right?
That's always yes, and I forget about. So this is why it's hard, because the outside skirts, where they come together, because that's the diaphragm muscle, where they come together and meet in your cavity, that is that hanger steak. So it has that connective tissue down the middle. Technically, it is part of the plate, although it's kind of just like inside the animal. That might be like a miscellaneous category if they had one, but I think they do technically assign it to the plate.
Gotcha. Hanger's kind of a funny steak because a lot of times it's cut as one steak, but it's really two, right? I mean, it's where the two sides come together.
Yeah.
There's a seam.
You have to seam it apart to utilize it, and so that a lot of times it's harder to find because it's one cut on a carcass. But if you really are in dire need of it, I mean, you turn to your outside skirt. That's definitely probably the best one to substitute it for.
Excellent. All right, let's talk a bit more about this. We've mentioned the belly or the navel at different times on the podcast. It actually surprised me in sort of my research for this. The belly always has brisket-esque characteristics, which anatomically it sits right next to it. Actually, I learned in the UK. In UK butchering standards, it's actually considered part of the brisket.
I could see that. I mean, there is part of that brisket flat is on the belly based off of where you cut it and how you cut it. So typically you'd break down your your animal splitting between the 5th and 6th rib on the carcass. So you separate your brisket from your plate down there. So you get some of that brisket flat on your plate portion. However, a lot of our packers will actually come in and pull down the brisket to have it be on the brisket side and then split too. That's why you get the variation of thickness at the end of that flat, which is kind of neat. But it also can be left on. It kind of is dependent on what their needs are, what they're filling, and all of that. So
interesting, Chef Tony. The belly, right? Historically, I actually learned this from our pal Jeremy Umansky. The original pastrami was actually made from fowl, right? But beef pastrami, which is obviously kind of the en vogue pastrami for about the last 100 years, generally came from the plate, right?
It did, yeah. I mean, and you're seeing a lot of variations of the belly now. Not only the beef bacon you kind of mentioned in the beginning, right? Which we had done many times before Schmaken came out, and that's a tribute to Howard Bender from Devanco Foods, who kind of like took a long time. I have to give him credit. He stuck with this and stuck with it and stuck with it. And he kept on sending samples to all of us every month. And this was for years. It was too salty. It was too smoky. It didn't have this. It didn't have this. It didn't have the chew, blah, blah, blah. But then he nailed it.
He did.
He nailed it.
He's got it now.
So from an artisanal, point of view, right now, we have a lot of chefs that want to do something different. The Schmaken is like on the market.
Mm-hmm.
So you can find this in like grocery stores in your region.
Yep.
Not sure which ones, but I know I've seen it around, Ohio.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of our distributors carry it now. The Cisco houses, U.S. Foods. Not sure who carries it, from that standpoint. But it's something that is just amazing. So, not only is it's just booming in the Middle East.
Yes.
Okay, so you can imagine.
Yep.
There's no really pork, and that's like one of their dietary. They don't really eat a lot of pork, but they eat beef, and so the beef bacon is perfect in that market.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do so much with it from an artisanal standpoint. So, from an Asian standpoint. You're all these chefs are used to using the pork belly to,
side,
So what we've done, we've used the beef belly. So being a classically trained chef in our team, and all our team, we just take variations from what we've seen in other recipes and use beef in them, and we can come up with a Shanghai braised beef, which is the navel. That's been cooked just like a pork navel, right? With soy sauce and ginger and scallion, boiled or braised very, very slow. Then we kind of press it, so it kind of looks like that beef, that pork, that one bite that you're looking for, the pork belly, the crispy pork belly, and then because you've tenderized it by boiling or slow cooking, braising. This is just amazing, and you can cut really nice bites out of this and use that for hors d'oeuvres or come on guys, get creative here, So that's pretty epic. We've done that before, and so that's or Korean style where you're shaving it very, very thin, lengthwise, and you're just putting that on a very, very hot Korean grill with your sauces. Amazing. Like quick grill, right?
Yeah.
Takes 30 seconds, 20 seconds. And you serve that with garlic and gochujang or whatever. And so that's just kind of amazing. So there's so many different applications, and the skirt steak is one of my favorite, outside skirt steak.
Right.
Pastrami, like Jeremy does up in Cleveland, is amazing.
Yeah.
It's so amazing that Thomas Keller and Daniel Ballou eat up there. So let's plug Jeremy a little bit here. And
Pretty big deal.
That's a pretty big deal. I mean, they don't come through these neck of the woods very often.
No, stopping in Cleveland, like they made a stop for a reason.
Right.
Exactly.
They called ahead. How about you talk about those tasty bites, right? And that, I mean, when I think of pork belly or something like that, it is a they're bite size, but it's so packed with that flavor. That flavor, right? We've talked about on this podcast many times. That's fat, right? And that fat, brisket fat, it's a very similar type of fat in the navel as well because of its anatomical location. That's a really super tasty fat, right?
Yeah, brisket fat itself, that's what more unsaturated fat. And remember, we talked about that oleic acid. And the beauty of it, too, that oleic acid in the fat, the more marbling that the animal has, the more oleic acid is going to be found throughout the entire carcass. So given that certified Angus beef is modest or higher, so average choice or higher, we have more marbling in the carcass regardless. So no matter where you're getting that cut from, you're going to have more of that oleic acid in there, which is more desirable to the human palate. So basically saying you eat it once, you start drooling and you want more of it. That's the simplistic terms, yes.
I can fully understand where you're coming from with that. Oh my gosh. So one of my favorite applications with that beef navel was actually when it was treated like a pork belly, but I mean the top was scored and everything. The fat on there, that crispy fat, you can just snap it off, and it's such perfect little bites. We talk sometimes about these cuts that are difficult to get. The plates out, or I'm sorry, the belly, the short plate portion, that's there, right? There are major packers producing this.
Yeah, without a doubt, that is available. A lot of times too, you think about international markets, like that would be definitely a big international market as well. Seasonality-wise, you might see it less available when ground beef is really highly consumed or highly sought after, which it's always on high demand. But you think about how I said before that's utilized for 50-50 trim. So you just kind of see some fluctuation there. But we do have many packers putting this in a box and shipping it. So it's definitely an item that you can get.
Excellent. Can you order a whole plate?
No, because they break down, like they're going to take off those skirt steaks right away. I mean, even that's the one cut that even on the, before they rib the carcass, they actually will pull down that inside skirt so it's kind of hanging there all together. So it's just ready to peel off. It's just heavily utilized, heavily sought after. So to get a whole plate would be hard. But honestly, once you peel those skirt steaks off and the short ribs are gone, the ribs, so the short ribs are only the first 3 ribs, so 6, 7, and 8. You still have ribs 9 through 12 that are sitting there, but there's just pretty much a lot of fat on them. There's not too much lean, but that still is something that is sold internationally. You think about that being cut thin, like Tony was saying, putting into some hot liquid braising of some sort. Could definitely be utilized in that application.
Excellent. Let's talk about them as barbecue use, those plate short ribs. Those are the big guys.
Yes, those are the long bones, definitely that impressive bite, without a doubt. From a flavor standpoint, from an appearance standpoint, it looks pretty cool.
And they're huge. It's when I had heard that a rib, right, at certain barbecue joints in Texas, that's like $50 for a rib. But then you see it, and it's like, oh, this is like a rib that can feed multiple people.
And you think about the fat content in there. I mean, there's a lot of fat because it's heavily marbled. So you get full fairly quick. And on top of that, you're smoking it. So in my opinion, personally, you smoke, you really condense that flavor because you're driving out the moisture. So you really don't need to eat as much. This is always, if anyone else has ever gotten a belly ache after they've eaten a lot of smoked beef.
Never.
Okay, it's not in a I'm sick belly ache, but like, oh my gosh, I'm so full. Like I think there's a 20-pound brick in my
Brian
stomach.
and I got big bellies, so we
right.
don't feel that.
We've trained for this time.
See? But it's usually that all that meat that's been smoked, it's just filling your stomach now. It's being able to kind of expand a little bit down there. But it's very satiating. So you could get a whole rib and it could feed a few people. Or it could feed one person too. I don't want to offend anyone out there.
I'll decide how many people this feeds.
That is a great social media picture too. When those ribs are cooked properly and you put that in between a bun and you pull that bone out, that is like
it's like a samurai sword coming out.
Wow.
Right? That
That is the wow moment.
I agree with that
chefs,
one.
you can, it's the wow effect.
I agree with that one. I really do.
It's so good. And when you see those come off the smoker, because there's so much collagen, things that need to break down in that low, it jiggles.
Uh-huh.
And it's just like, it's just happiness on a bone.
I mean, the minute you said see it come off a smoker, in my brain I have a slow motion video of someone grabbing it and you just slowly see it moving back and forth.
The jiggle.
It's beautiful.
Right?
It's beautiful. Oh, all right. One last thing I want to touch on. You've already mentioned it once. Obviously, we've talked about the outside skirt. I mean, outside skirt. I was in Miami.
Outstanding.
Everybody's got an outside skirt down in Miami, right? Inside skirt, though, it's there. It needs a little help, though, right?
Yeah. When we always outside skirt outstanding, inside skirt in a marinade. And you know, I say that because it does perform better in a marinade. However, I mean, our chefs have cooked them side by side, just grilled. It's still good. It doesn't really salt and pepper sliced it's still good. It has a little bit more chew in it when you think about what it's doing. It's holding up that big heavy rumen, so it has a lot more collagen, connective tissue that needs to be broken down. But even without that marinade, it still can perform. It's got a ton of flavor. There's still a lot of marbling in that cut. I feel like it's always everyone. Inside skirt. Like, it's still great. Like, if that's what we're complaining about, really, I'd take it any day. But it could benefit from using it in a marinade for sure.
Excellent. So, as our pal Dr. Phil Bass in episode 1 of this season said, don't underestimate heat as a great tenderizer. These are cuts, you would take these a little farther?
Yeah, and it's easy to take them farther because they're thin. So usually they're cooked more. I mean, it's hard to hit that. It's hard to get a thermometer in there. Let's really be serious on that one. But it's easy to take them farther, and they definitely perform better. Going to medium, almost pushing medium well. I hate saying that on air, but you know.
But you know what? Heat breaks down that stuff,
yes.
right? Yeah, it needs it.
Yes, and so you actually get more nutrition out of a cut that's cooked to your medium rare. It's kind of cool to see.
Interesting.
I know. I just watched a seminar about this on American Meat Science Association. It's where all the cool kids hang out. Wow, do I sound like a nerd? But they showed how the rare has less nutrient value than your medium rare, and then when you go to well, it drops down. So it's kind of funny. It's that sweet spot or savory spot, I should say, right in between.
Right. Well, you know, it reminds me, if you go all the way back to episode 1 from 3 years ago, we talked about there's a school of thought that says that meat and cooking meat specifically is the reason that human brains have developed as they have, because by cooking it, by applying heat to meat, you're unlocking those additional nutrients. So what you're saying is cavemen back in the day probably like their steaks medium to mid well.
Yeah,
maybe
sense. From a food safety standpoint, they should have probably done it well done. Let's be real.
That's right. They eat their mastodon steaks.
It's just in dirt covering. That was their seasoning, just dirt, probably.
It's earthy. It's earthy. All right. Oh, you know what? One last thing, just because you touched on it already. Lifter meat, right?
Yes.
We have good friends down in Texas, right? They make like fajita strips, right? They're called John Souls. They're fantastic. They're using lifter meat for that, right?
Yes, and it's great. The coolest part, from a science standpoint, it is really neat how they have the ability to do this, because they put it in a marinade, but it's to the point where it's not too aggressive, because you have to think about it. I'm going to package it. It's going to sit in refrigerator or freezer for how long. So we want to make sure that marinade isn't turning it into mush, but just that right level and just adding that tenderness to it. And they can do a neutral marinade. So it has the tenderness, but you add the flavor. Or if you want to get some seasoned profiles, you can do that as well. But I just love the versatility of that. I mean, you get a cut in that it's tender. I mean, but it's a lot lower cost, and now I can put my own flair to it, and here we go. And it's fantastic.
Yeah, and full credit, it's called fajita meat on their menu. They don't call it lifter meat. Probably not a
that's probably
good,
not a
good term.
That's probably unless you're like trying to feed bodybuilders.
You know, you could. Well, I think you could have your waiter tableside explaining. Well, it's called lifter meat because it lifts all the organs, right? And then the customer leaves the restaurant.
It's like, okay, and we're done.
Maybe leave that.
Oh, I had the best lifter meat tonight.
It's incredible. On that note, we are going to let these guys get back to their home. You guys have some stuff going on over at the Culinary Center. It's nice. Things are back busy again. It's glorious. You guys are working. I'm going to Miami and eating. We're all back at it, right? That's it. If this is your first time listening to the Meat Speak podcast, know that you can find us across all of your major podcasting platforms: Google Play, Apple, Spotify. Specifically, go to the Apple icon. That's the little purple nub on your Apple phone. If you have one, leave us a star ranking, leave us a review. You can also leave us a review now on Spotify. Which Spotify is so in the news right now with the whole Joe Rogan, Neil Young thing. Listen, I don't touch that. We're here for meat.
Yes.
So regardless of what you think of Spotify, go find us on there, leave us a review, right? Not because it's, necessary for our egos. Believe me, my ego is plenty healthy. But it does help with our overall visibility of this podcast. And this podcast is obviously owned by Certified Angus Beef, which is owned by farmers and ranchers in every single state in the union. It's a nonprofit. How about that?
That is pretty awesome.
Amazing, huh? So if you want to help farmers, leave us a star ranking and a review. And as always, if you've taken this information and done something with it on your menu in your meat shop, send us a picture. Slide into our DMs on the Instagram. It's meat_speak. And until next time, Chef Tony Biggs, meat scientist Anna Clark. Guys, we'll see you later.